All right, guys. So one of the topics that we wanted to talk about today briefly, and I think this is such an important topic because if done effectively, it will generate results. But if overlooked, it's going to completely limit your results on both lead generation, conversion, customer acquisition, all of these things. And the topic is your calls to action, CTAs, your calls to action. And this concept, I think, from a landing page perspective, it's where are my calls to action within my page? What do my calls to action look like? What do they read? And are they positioned in a place where, as my viewer is looking at my content, they're more or less likely to click or take the call to action? And the call to action can be several things, right? This could be a button I want people to click on. It could be a form I want them to fill out. It could be a piece of video or something else I want them to read or to watch. So your call to action is that ask that you're asking the viewer to take, what action you're asking the viewer to take. And when we talk about constructing content online, remember we have these 5 baseline rules just to consider. They're sort of the overarching rules that we want to think about when we're creating landing pages and content online. And it is, what is the goal of your landing page, right? Every landing page should have one primary goal, not 1,000 goals. We don't want to confuse people who are viewing our pages or our content. So really come in with a specific goal. And then that goal usually dictates what the calls to action are going to be. Maybe the goal is to capture leads. Maybe the goal is to drive somebody to my shopping cart. Maybe the goal is to get somebody to watch a video or download my information or give me their information. All of those are separate goals, and you don't want to have too many on a card. Then what are the elements that are supporting your goal? And one of those elements is going to be your call to action. Then we talk about the order of those elements, right? Where on the page, what's above the fold, what's below the fold, how somebody scrolls. We want to keep all that in mind as we're detailing out or outlining where our content is going to be placed and the order of those elements. Finally, the calls to action, that's the most critical component. And then lastly, number 5, the design. So, I'm going to get ready to pass this over to you, Guy, but a big thing on calls to action is you don't just need to have one. You can have multiple calls to action on a page. You can have calls to action like towards the top, in the middle, down below. We've talked about this in the past. If we talk about a sales page that has more scroll to it, you're trying to address and overview stuff, eliminate objections, answer questions, provide more details as the viewer scrolls, and you're seeding in different calls to action along that scroll in order to allow the person to take the action once they've had enough information to make an informed decision. Some viewers, again, they can make a decision really quick and a call to action at the top will get taken. Other viewers, they've got to keep scrolling and reading and gathering information and answering questions and overcoming their own personal objections. And by the time they get to the bottom, you don't want them to scroll all the way back up to the top to hit the call to action. You want to put calls to action at the bottom. So calls to action are just the things we want our people to take. But if you overlook how you're leveraging and using calls to action, you're going to miss out on somebody taking that action and moving forward in your process.
To add to it, I think, the conversation of call to actions really should be looked at almost like at a holistic aspect of, if I'm a marketer or if I ran a marketing agency, what are my call to actions? What are my value that I'm bringing to my customers? And in turn, as an affiliate, what are the value that we're bringing to individuals to be able to let other people know the importance of having calls to action, right? We're in a digital age. There's a handful of elements that I feel that are important from a call to action, not just so much on the button and where it lays, but why have them, right? The main thing really is for engagement and user interaction. If we could have, which we do, interactive call to actions, we encourage people to actively engage in the content. Actively engage with what's on a card, with maybe that card link goes to a website. We encourage them to take action. But if we don't provide that button, if we don't look at it from that aspect and talking to other people on, do you have calls to action? If someone handed me a paper business card, what would my response be, or why would I say I want to receive this? Because the call to action, there's friction here. I've got to digitize this. I can digitize it with Shuffle, but to the everyday person walking in the street, there's so many things that are just missed in marketing and relaying messages. So you can include that in clickable buttons, filling out forms. I know, Jeff, with your funnels, there's probably forms in there somewhere that people fill out that take them to another section. There's participations in surveys. Engagement really helps keep those visitors interested in what you have, what you're offering. And it's got to be interesting enough for them to select or scan or tap your call to actions. You've got to have clear directions. There's a term that I've been using this last week with something that's coming, and it's adding an additional word to call to actions. It's interactive call to actions. If we're in print media, right? If we're talking to someone who owns a magazine, what value are they bringing to their advertisers? Well, yes, they can get in front of hundreds, if not thousands of people, and that's probably the value. But if you could offer an interactive call to action to each advertiser, to each individual, you're going to get a higher rate of return for each person advertising, and you're probably going to have more people knocking on your door to get into your print media. So instead of just leaving people wondering what to do in the next step, have your call to actions. In our landing pages, you've got your buttons. You can either have the wording on the button be a call to action, or have a section talking about selecting the button and what's going to happen, so they can follow and track through what you're trying to express to them. You've got to be the guide in those individuals' cases, right? What would a call to action be for, I don't know if it would be competitor, but a link tree? Well, there's a lot, but I don't know what to click. And if you have 50 links, I'm probably going to click the first one and not going to click another one.
Yeah.
Because it gets confusing, and I've got to have something within my content to notify the individual where they're going and what steps I want them to take. We get improved user experiences, right? If you've got a well-designed CTA, QR code, button, whatever it is, it's going to increase the user's experience. Ruben, you're setting in Zoom meetings or in alignable meetings. It improves the interaction by having your QR code. It improves what other people are able to see what you do and what you offer and how to connect with you, compared to ER and Jeff and I right now, just with our videos, right? It's easier for people to scan and understand that there's potential to move forward in that call to action. There's higher conversion rates with our call to action. ER, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I know you know the story is the large company that had one person come in and say, hey, look at our website and make a suggestion. And I believe it's just a short read, but the title of it is the $300 million button. And if you want to talk more to that, feel free now. Or, you also have the option for, sorry, I just kept going. I left you there. My call to actions are data collection, right? Interactive call to actions are used to collect valuable data. You've got your forms, your surveys, your quizzes, you name it. It's to gather insights of what people are interested in, what they're selecting. You don't Not every QR code is providing data. There's a lot of QR code providers out there that are free that offer you a static QR code. There's not much data that can be received from those types of things. You have personalization of your call to actions. You can tailor them, right? We can tailor the send of a particular card to someone. We can make the call to action tailored towards them. We can do a video tailored towards them, directly to that individual. It's just hacking and knowing what to utilize and how to put it in to your shuffle account or your shuffle cards. Simply just video yourself with your phone, load it into YouTube. Don't publish it from a public aspect, but one that can be shared. And when it's shared, those individuals can view it. You always get the opportunities for A/B testing your call to actions to know what's working and what's not, and what copy can be adjusted and what design can be adjusted and where I place it. That's going to determine the performance of your call to actions. I think one of the biggest things is the mobile friendliness. We continue to move in this mobile direction, right? We're never going to get less technical than we are today. And more things are being developed for the smartphone first. It's why there's so many native apps out there, because it works on the phone specifically and maybe not carry over to the web or your responsive mobile. You get the ability to have enhanced branding and just the adaptation of changing with what's trending in call to actions are things that we want to be able to provide. We'll continue moving forward with. Yeah, that's sort of what I have. ER, if you want to talk about the $300 million button or expand on the call to actions, but not just a button. It's where you place it and the design and how it's being delivered.
Yeah. I'll talk briefly on this. And guys, this is something any of us can go on Google and look up, or whatever your search engine of choice is, and just type in the $300 million button. In fact, I just did it now, and a Fast Company article came up regarding this. But I think this is important when it comes to call to action. And this is a story that I'm going to paraphrase real quick. You have a company, they're an e-commerce company. They're billing or generating millions of dollars in revenue, but they're looking at maybe the bounce rate of their traffic, right? They're measuring the results of what their process produces. And they're seeing an exorbitant amount of abandoned shopping carts, let's say, right? People who put product into a shopping cart from the e-commerce store, but failed to complete the checkout process. So they have somebody come in to review it. I believe the name of the company was like, I don't know, United Interface Engineering, UIE. They review it and they find out that as they exited through this checkout process, that people who were buying were presented with two options, two calls to action. One was to log into their existing account to complete their checkout. The other was to create a new account. And they realized after talking to customers that many of the customers didn't want to do either of those two options. They just wanted to pay for their order and check out. And so they ended up either adding a button or changing the button on create a new account because it was optional. And that was confusing people, right? And so they updated that. And the first month it added $15 million in new revenue that was being abandoned in the first place from customers that just finally completed the flow. And then by the end of the first year, another $300 million in new revenue had been generated. And again, based on what they could measure was that slight change. Imagine that in your own business. And this is why we split test. This is why we measure. This is why we put stuff out there and see what the result is because you may see that something is working, but what you want to do is once you know what is working, you want to optimize it. And there is there's a diminishing return in optimization, but typically, and we hear this statistically on landing pages and even in funnels, you might go through an average of 10, 12, up to 20 different iterations on a page, just adjusting things to see if you can optimize the performance. And the call to action is a big part of that. I think, Guy, the last thing I'll say in closing about call to action, and this is something very interesting, right? When we think of call to action, typically we're thinking about the calls to action that we have within the content and the landing pages that we create. But really, call to action is any action that you're asking the person you're interacting with to take. And that could be things that you have during conversations, at meetings, when you first meet people, all of those types of things that lead them to the path of going down or selecting the option or the action that you want them to take. You know, it might be the call to action to set the next meeting. It might be the call to action to close the sale, to ask for the sale. You know, I think there's a lot of examples out there, Guy, of people who fail to even do the correct call to action by asking for the sale if they've presented all the information. If you're a person who uses online content to generate calls for yourself, maybe you're a salesperson, you know, once you're having that call, then you want to go out there and you want to get the sale, or you want to have that meeting with that person and take them through the process. So I think there's a massive opportunity that gets overlooked both in the content we create that we put out there for people to engage with, right? Think about the videos you make. You may need to put your call to action. What are you asking them to do in the video? Or Guy, you talked about the text that we had on the page. Maybe you need to put the call to action in the text to reference the button or the form or the things that you're asking them to do. You are the guide. Or outside of that content, maybe it's just the conversation that you're having with them and saying, hey, this was so great. Let's talk about next steps. Let's talk about me invoicing you or finalizing this order, etc. And you're thinking about that process that you go through and what those calls to action are going to be. So I'd encourage you to read that $300 million button article for some more context, and then take a step back and review your process, your content, what you do, and look for opportunities to either add or optimize your calls to action. All right, everybody, I'm going to stop the recording here and we'll open this up for a quick Q&A, and then we will finalize this call.